The diagnosis that I provided in the report was schizophrenia. Hallucinations are just experiences that someone may have that other people do not. These can be auditory hallucinations, for example, hearing voices, whispers. In Mr. Reinking's case, he heard people shouting outside of his apartment, barking like dogs. He heard the voice of Taylor Swift.
Welcome back. Today, the state rested their case in the trial against the alleged Waffle House shooter. A detective read a letter that Travis Reinking wrote to Oprah Winfrey. Then the defense began their case by calling an expert, Dr. Elizabeth Wood. She's a forensic psychologist who testified that the defendant suffers from schizophrenia. Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter was in the courtroom all day and has more on what happened.
The defense of Travis Reinking is working to persuade this jury that he should be found not guilty by reason of insanity. And in that effort, the defense called Dr. Elizabeth Wood, a forensic psychologist who evaluated Reinking over the course of 3 interviews. She concluded that Reinking suffered from schizophrenia and that at the time of the Waffle House murders, Reinking was unable to appreciate the wrongness of his actions.
In fact, Mr. Reinking said that after walking into the Waffle House and the gun jammed, part of him at that moment believed that may have been God intervening. That was what he had prayed to happen, and he wondered if he had sort of finished the job at that point, and that's why the gun jammed.
On cross-examination, Assistant District Attorney Ronald Dowdy got fired up as he pressed the expert on how she did not consider the surviving victim's testimony and the conscious actions Reinking took that day.
Well, he's saying it was punitive to him.
Correct.
And therefore he's going to be punitive to the people who were inside the Waffle House, those innocent people who lost their lives.
Earlier in the day, the prosecution called a final witness before resting its case in chief. The lead investigator showed the jury photos of Reinking's apartment at the time of the crime, but on cross, the defense had the officer read letters found in that apartment, one to Taylor Swift and one to Oprah Winfrey, where he asked Winfrey for help in determining whether his delusions that Taylor Swift was communicating with him through the internet were real or not.
Oprah, I'm writing you because I'm in love with Taylor Swift and I don't know if I'm delusional or not. I started writing Taylor June 2nd, 2015. The letters were about dreams that I was having. I saw Taylor for the first time September 29th, 2015. It was at a concert and she mouthed the words hello to me while she was singing a song.
While these letters were read, the defendant, who hasn't exhibited any overt reactions the entire trial, did react in the courtroom by what appeared to be embarrassment and covering his head and even laughing at one point. And Ted, tomorrow we do expect the defense case to continue with one more mental health expert, and the defense even intends to call Reinking's uncle to the stand before they rest. I'll send it back to you.
All right, our thanks to Chanley Painter. Joining us now to help us break all this down from Nashville, Tennessee, psychiatrist Jonathan Metzl is with us. Jonathan, thank you for your time to help us break this down. You've been monitoring this trial. Your thoughts on the defendant and his mental capacity. Today's the expert witness was just absolutely riveting, and I think gave a lot of our viewers a lesson into the mind of someone suffering from mental illness. What's your take on this?
It's a very interesting case, right? I mean, it's a very unusual case, and that basically the defense started their defense by admitting that Travis Reinking committed the murder. So they're admitting that the person they're defending did commit these 4 murders and injure 2 other people, and the state, the prosecution, is effectively admitting that he's mentally ill. So both sides are admitting the main contention of the other side in a way, and so the entire case rests on, at the time that he committed these acts, was he acting because of mental illness? Did he know right from wrong at those moments? And that really was the core of the defense case. They didn't challenge really any of the witnesses, and really their case is resting on this expert testimony. I have a lot of thoughts about the expert testimony today. I'll just say that on one hand, I mean, it's very clear that Travis Reinking was suffering from serious delusions and psychotic level mental illness. I think schizophrenia is probably the right diagnosis. But if I was pushing this witness, I would have asked this witness, this expert, I would have asked this expert, where in the DSM criteria for schizophrenia does it say that a symptom of schizophrenia is attacking somebody else, is harming somebody else, is shooting somebody else? That's not part of the diagnosis of schizophrenia. That's conjecture, that there's a relationship between the illness and the act. And so while I did find the expert to be very compelling today, I thought that there was a link between the diagnosis and the act that the state really should have pushed harder on. And I don't think, at least on this first day, they did that.
So to that point, you think, so, all right, he's got schizophrenia, he's possibly, it sounds like there's proof of that from his past.
Sure.
But at that moment when he's in the Waffle House, from what you know, do you think he knows right from wrong? Does he know what he's doing is wrong, or does he think what he's doing is absolutely right because he's getting the orders?
Well, the question for me as a psychiatrist is what framework would I understand that through? In other words, most people who have schizophrenia, I can read you the criteria for schizophrenia. They're delusions, hallucinations, paranoia, social withdrawal, what are called negative symptoms. There's nothing in any of those symptoms that says that somebody with schizophrenia would attack somebody else. The other factor is even people who have command hallucinations, which is another thing I would have, if I was the state, pressed this expert on quite a bit more. Most people who have command hallucinations don't act on those. They don't hear a voice and automatically go do the thing. It's not like a one-to-one correlation. So I would have pushed a lot harder to say, how do you know that he was acting based on what those voices were telling him? Break that down for us. Tell us what the voices were saying. And I don't think that was pressed hard. And so absent that information, it's hard to know. I mean, certainly, again, he was not mentally well. There's no doubt about that. But I would also say that there are so many other factors that could explain a mass shooting, everything from racism didn't come up at all, for example, or access to firearms, some other factors, like all the other factors. So in a way, if you're just making the claim that it's just the mental illness that's causing this, then I think you really have to push on the expert a lot harder to say, show us the proof that the mental illness is what led to this causal action, instead of just taking it for granted.
Dr. Jonathan Metzl, thank you for your expertise and your valuable time. We really appreciate it. Let's bring in the think tank. Eklund Mercy is still with us, along with former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani and criminal defense attorney Kirk Nerby. Eklund, your thoughts on this? It's such a heartbreaking case all around. I mean, these people were just out at the Waffle House and they ended up dead, and the ones that didn't die, some were injured. All of them will live with it the rest of their lives. And then you hear the defendant with the struggles that he was going on. What's your overall feeling about this case and about how, I guess, society deals with this Travis Reinking?
Society doesn't. Unfortunately, mental health is still a major problem, and people need help. With regards to paranoid schizophrenia, unfortunately, the history is clear. We have a lot of serial killers who had also been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. You had Son of Sam, Ed Gein, David Gonzalez, just a few serial killers who were also diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Now we have Reinking, who was undiagnosed until he was arrested for for killing 4 people. So, murder is the unlawful killing of another with malice aforethought, either express or implied. So we really have to go and really, really dissect his intent. And if he did not have intent to kill anybody, and the voices, the same voice that talked to Oprah, that talked to Taylor Swift, is talking to him, then that's something that has to be considered.
Kirk, the cross-examination of the lead detective today ended with having the detective read this letter from Oprah. It came from the state's case, their final witness, and it was one of those moments in the courtroom where you start listening and then you keep listening, and everybody had the feeling, oh boy, this young man had issues before the shooting. Your thoughts on how that all played out, and does the defense have, I guess, a chance here to have Reinking in a mental facility rather than state prison?
Well, look, ultimately, yes, when we hear those letters and we hear about incidents of him stealing the BMW and other actions that an intervention maybe could have prevented this tragedy, it is really sad, and echoing what Eklund said. But as far as the letters and all this reading, it really seemed like a strange choice for the state to end their case on. I don't know whether, it had kind of a belittling tone to it, but it really did illustrate his mental illness, his mental defects, and the depth of it when he's writing all these letters to these different people about his love for Taylor Swift and some of the things that came out. Now, the second part of your question, Ted, you ask about, do they have a chance of putting him in a mental facility as opposed to prison? I think ultimately the answer is no, because as the doctor you just had on emphasized, there's an intangibility, an inherent intangibility to psychological testimony. You can't always put those two blocks together that he was saying that this state's expert should have done. I think, in my opinion, it can't always be done. And so that lack of tangibility makes the jurors a little more suspect of it. And in contrast, you have very tangible tragedy, right? You have the 4 dead, murder victims. You have their families. You have everything that happened here. And the tangibility of that and the pain of that is very hard to overcome with an intangible insanity defense.
Nima, what stands out to you?
What stands out to me is, look, Reinking is mentally ill. There's no question about that. But what is he so mentally ill that he was unable to determine what's right and what's wrong? And I don't think the defense has met its burden. I mean, there's law enforcement witness after witness that came and testified over the past few days and said, look, he was compliant. He was asking for water. Look, I mean, obviously he was naked and wearing just a jacket, but, he fled and he was at large for a while. And it's not like he didn't understand when officers were questioning him or talking to him. And despite Taylor Swift and aliens and Donald Trump and all that, I believe that he knew right from wrong. Maybe they can pick off 1 or 2 jurors and try to hang this jury, but I think we're headed towards a guilty verdict here, Ted.
All right, we'll wait and see more testimony tomorrow as the state continues to present their case in Nashville.